So there are reports Netanyahu is thwarting the ceasefire deal. I'm not sure if that's true, but these new reports do unfortunately shine a light on some holes in the agreement, which could cause it to eventually fall apart. This here is from the Jerusalem Post. Let me just pull this up here. All right. The Prime Minister's office announced on Thursday morning that the IDF would not withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor during the first phase of the hostage deal on Thursday morning. Quote, contrary to misleading reports, Israel is not withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor. Israel will remain in phase A of the corridor for the entire 42-day period, the statement said. The scope of forces will remain at its current size, but will be deployed differently, encompassing outposts, patrols, observations, and control along the entire corridor. During phase A, starting on the 16th day, negotiations will begin on ending the war. If Hamas does not agree to Israel's demands for ending the war, achieving the war's objectives, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor on the 42nd day and consequently beyond the 50th day. In practical terms, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor until further notice, the statement concluded. Okay, so people are saying this is Netanyahu once again backing out of the deal. The deal said explicitly that Israel is to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor, from the Philadelphia corridor, as well as other areas of Gaza. They have to withdraw from these areas during phase one. Now, what this shows, now here's the document ceasefire agreement. And I'm just going to kind of point out this, the fourth provision on the agreement is that, and this is a specific language, and this is what Netanyahu's using in order to basically thwart this deal. So it says the Israeli side will gradually reduce the forces in the corridor area during stage one. So this is phase A, based on the accompanying maps and the agreement between both sides. So they are to, according to this agreement that's been signed, they are to gradually reduce their forces in the Philadelphia corridor. And yet Netanyahu and his team comes out and says, we're going to remain in the Philadelphia corridor until further notice. Then it says in the provision in the agreement, after the last hostage release of stage one on day 42, the Israeli forces will begin their withdrawal and complete it no later than day 50. That's in the agreement. Okay, day 42, after the last hostage has been released in phase one, Israel has to begin withdrawing all of their forces from the Philadelphia corridor, and they've got to get that done by day 50. By day 50, there should be no more Israeli forces in that area. But Netanyahu, according to the Jerusalem Post, has come out saying, I don't think so. He's saying that starting on day 16 of phase one, so well before the 42nd day when they need to start withdrawing the troops legally, according to the document, that starting on day 16, after some hostages have been released, they get to start negotiations for phase B, for phase two of the agreement. It's a 3-phase agreement. So phase two, they're going to start negotiating. And what he's essentially saying, what the Jerusalem Post, what this Prime Minister's office note said, is that if they don't get what they want, if Israel doesn't get what they want in these negotiations beginning on the 16th day, then they're not going to withdraw on the 42nd day, and they're not going to be out of there by the 50th day. So you see what's happened here? What's happened is Israel has found a loophole. Netanyahu has found a loophole. And that is, yeah, you know what? We agree to this, but if we don't like what you have to say starting on day 16, we're just going to back out of the whole agreement, is what he's basically saying here. So this is, once again, Netanyahu thwarting the deal. I mean, is it technically just yet? No, because the deal says starting on day 42, they have to start the withdrawal and they have to get out of there by day 50. And he says, yeah, we're not going to withdraw. We're not going to even start the withdrawal process until day 42. That's when we'll begin. We're not going to go any earlier than that. Day 42 is when we'll start. And we'll take all the way to the 50th day. But if we don't like what you have to say starting on the 16th day, if the negotiations don't go our way, we're not getting out of here. So he's found a loophole to get out of this whole entire agreement. So I guess don't celebrate just yet. I mean, we were all celebrating the ceasefire agreement yesterday, but now, crafty, sneaky little Netanyahu's figured out a way to get around it. And we'll see what happens starting on the 16th day if he backs out of this deal and says, never mind, I don't like what Hamas has to say. And what is it that he wouldn't like? A lot. a lot. I mean, Netanyahu is getting a lot of flack. And this is probably why he's backtracking now. I think the Trump administration gave him a stern talking to, but now he's getting a lot of flack from the Israeli people. They're in hysterics. They're crying. They're sobbing. They're feeling like they're betrayed. They think Trump betrayed them. They're just so upset. And he also is now having some pressure from inside his own government. He's got Ben Gvir threatening to leave the government if Netanyahu goes forward with this deal. He's saying, "That's it. I'm leaving. I'll leave the government and I'll only come back if we can commit our genocide once again. Once the genocide moves forward again, then I'll come back to the government. But as long as there's no genocide, I am not here." That's what Ben Gvir basically said. So this could be one of the reasons why Netanyahu is now kind of changing his tone. Also, I want to read this to you. This comes from Saul Sadka. This was a big post online, and this kind of summarizes a lot of the thinking of a lot of the Israelis right now. I'm seeing Ben Shapiro say really similar things. A lot of these Israelis, they're basically trying to cope with the fact that there is now a ceasefire agreement, and they don't like the agreement, so they're trying to say, "We didn't lose, we've won. Hamas is lost." And I think this is really telling because it just showcases that the Israelis have no self-awareness whatsoever of what is going on here. So he goes on and says, "Since Hamas are now celebrating their great victory over Israel, let's review their many achievements over the last 15 months in the light of their initial goals. One, they failed to conquer Jerusalem. Was that an initial goal of Hamas, was to conquer Jerusalem?" It says, two, they failed to drive the Jews into the sea. So this is how they're thinking, right? They think that the idea, and there are certainly a lot of Palestinians that they want the land back and they want the Jews to go. They say, "You don't belong here. You never belonged here. You showed up. You should leave. You should go back to where you came from." So there is that sentiment for sure. But a lot of them have, it is certainly not to, I guess, drive the Jews into the sea unless it's going to be on boat to get the hell out of there. Three, they failed to split Israeli society. Instead, they united them. I don't know if that was a goal. Four, they failed to isolate Israel. This is, again, total disconnect. He says, four, they failed to isolate Israel internationally. Even the Abraham Accords remain intact, is what he says. First of all, Israel is isolated internationally. The world is against Israel at this point. And the Abraham Accords are hanging by a thread. Yes, they remained intact. The countries that signed the Abraham Accords, that would be what? Who were the countries? Bahrain, Emirates, right? Sudan, Morocco. I mean, okay, these countries barely, they pretty much halted all diplomatic relationships with Israel during this time. So they were barely hanging by a thread. Five, they failed to harm Israel's economy, which continues to grow. Israel's economy is not doing well. That has been well reported on. Six, they failed to prove Israel was fragile. If anything, they demonstrated the opposite. Well, they demonstrated you're genocidal. Seven, they failed to make the Jews flee back to Europe as Israel's population has increased by 2.5%. That is not true. Millions of Israelis fled. Millions of Israelis left for Europe and for the United States. Eight, they failed to crash Israel's currency, which is now stronger. Nine, they destroyed their own axis of resistance. 10, they derailed the geopolitical plans of their backers, Iran, leaving them completely exposed. 11, their once fertile land is now devastated, requiring a generation to rebuild. Look at how happy he is about that. 12, most of their homes booby-trapped and used as weapon caches are destroyed. Clearing the rubble alone will take decades. 13, their tunnel network is gone. 14, they've alienated almost all their own people. 15, they have lost 99% of their rockets and have no means to rearm. 16, their leaders are either in hell or in Qatar or both. 17, most of their fighters are dead. 18, over 5,000 of their men will face trial for war crimes. 19, they lost their fighters at a 50-to-1 ratio compared to Israeli troops. 20, more than 10% of their population has fled, and perhaps another million have lost everything. 21, they caused destruction and losses among their allies in Lebanon. 22, they are now boxed in by the IDF with no hope of resupply. And no means of harming Israelis. 23, they tarnished the reputation of the UNRWA allies, UNRWA. 24, Israel has established a presence in their territory and will maintain constant surveillance. You already were. 25, they're being extirpated from the West Bank by their own Palestinian brothers. So what other great Hamas victories can you think of, he says? Well, um, there's one major victory that Hamas has, and it's the only one that actually really matters in this entire thing. I mean, they lost the battle, but they have effectively won the war. The entire world, for the first time since Israel's creation 77 years ago, is against the continuation of this Jewish apartheid nation. The entire world now sees it for what exactly it is. That's the first time in decades and decades, 77 years. This is the first time the world says, wait a minute, I don't know. I don't think this is right. That's what they accomplished. That is a massive accomplishment, because what we also know is that the younger generations, the more against Israel and the project they are. So that means, Israel might have won this battle of bombing the Palestinians to oblivion, committing a genocide. The world saw that. The young people, the old people that are staunchly pro-Israel, they're going to die. They're going to be dead. I mean, you're not going to have them as your allies for long. They're not going to be around. The Mitch McConnells of the world, they're all going to be dead. And you're going to have to contend with the young people. And the young people have overwhelmingly rejected Israel and this project. Overwhelmingly. That means Israel has, as these young people rise up into positions of power, Israel has 30 years max. 30 years max before people of the world, the young people of the world who rise up in positions of power, demand an end to the apartheid state. They'll demand it. They'll say, you cannot continue on like this. And it may happen earlier than 30 years. I mean, people are starting to demand it now as the powers. I think maybe it would still perhaps take 30 years, but that's not long. That's Israel lasting for 100 years in constant turmoil and battle, and constantly fearful, only to once again have history repeat itself, where the Jews are once again driven from the Holy Land. And that's what ultimately will happen, because I think now that they've exposed themselves as having completely genocidal thinking, I think that has caused a situation where I don't know, I think even the average person says, I don't know how the Israelis and the Palestinians can live together in one land in a one-state solution. That there's going to have to be, the Israelis have proven themselves to be really genocidal. So they're going to have, it may come to where there has to be a war like World War II, where ending the Nazi regime, ending the Zionist regime would happen only through a war where the world goes against Israel. And I know that right there is the biblical prophecies that many Christians point to, and they say, see, that's why we have to defend the Jews, because in Revelations, it says there will be this big battle of Armageddon. The world comes against the people and the Jewish people and all of these things. I think they have that completely misinterpreted. Quite honestly, I think that the actual blood Jewish, if you're going to believe in the Bible and all of those things, if you're going to believe in any of that, then when you look at the actual genetics of the people on the land, the most Jewish people genetically that stem from the ancient, what would be the ancient actual Israelites, are actually the Samaritans, the Jordanian Christians, the Syrian Christians, the Palestinian Christians. The Christian groups are actually the most genetically Jewish, genetically Israeli, or genetically the Israelites is what I would call them, the genetic Israelites. They actually have the most genetic makeup towards, and there are some Jewish groups, certainly none of the Ashkenazis, not a single one of them. But there are some other Jewish groups that do share quite a bit of DNA, according to studies, with the ancient Israelites. But the most Israelite of all the Israelites are the Samaritans and the Christians in the region, the Arab Christians. So if you were a Bible-believing person and you believe that God made this promise to Abraham and then to Isaac and Jacob, Israel, that their actual genetics, that their bloodline would inherit this land, and that the world would come against them, that they would be slaughtered, and it would almost look like There was no hope for them, which is what I see happening to the Palestinian people, not to the Israeli people right now. You would then have to deduce that actually the battle of Armageddon and the Savior coming to battle it out for the actual true blood Israelites would be the people coming together for the actual Samaritans and the Palestinians, the Arabs. They would be the Arabs today, logically. That's just how that would work. I don't think God, when he made those promises, said, it's those who identify as, it's like women. If you identify as a woman, then you are a woman. No, we reject that, right? We say, no, I'm actually a biological woman. And if you identify as a woman, it doesn't make you a woman. That makes you something different. And, you're a trans woman. And so there's these trans Jews. And I don't think God wrote that in there saying, well, if you're trans Jew, it counts. The promise was for you. It doesn't really work that way. So, just things to consider. I just think that the state has 30 years. If I'm wrong, I don't really believe in all those prophecies, but if I'm wrong and they are real, then I think those of you who do believe in them should maybe think about those again logically and maybe parse that out a little bit. But just this battle was won by Israel in a lot of ways. They definitely did a lot of destruction, but the war is not over. It won't be over. They certainly made sure of that. The Israelis made sure of that by not making peace and not giving dignity and human rights to the Palestinian people. And I just don't see Israel ultimately in the end winning this war. I just don't see that. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show. If you want to watch the full show, visit KimIversonShow.com. The show airs every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, it's KimIversonShow.com. See you there.